was born August 29th in 1948 in Portsmouth, Ohio, and that would make her 66 years old as of right now. And so we're going to talk a little bit about her life, some of the history that she's lived through, some of the things she's done, still wants to do. Now, you were born, like I said, August 29th in 1948 in Portsmouth, Ohio.
That's
And
correct.
and did you stay there your whole childhood or did you move around?
No, I was just there for 2 days and just at the hospital long enough to be born and then back to Columbus. My mother was visiting her mother in Piketon, Ohio at the time, and that was the closest hospital. So,
Oh,
but I
wow,
lived in
okay.
Columbus. Yeah,
Oh,
I was in Columbus.
okay, so you basically have lived in the Columbus, Ohio area for your whole life.
That's correct.
Growing up in Columbus, it started out, I mean, in looking up a little bit about Columbus online, it's the largest city in Ohio, I believe. But was it big when you were growing up in it, or have you got to see it develop into a bigger city?
Oh, I've got to see it grow into a much bigger city. We have a lot of suburbs, and so they're like little cities around the big city. It's sort of like the Tampa area, um, and it's grown tremendously over the years.
What were some of your favorite things as a child that you remember growing up in Columbus? Did you have special places that were always fun for you to go to, or?
I used to love to go when I got, let's see, around 10 years old, and it's something I wouldn't allow my 10-year-old to do today. I could get on the bus. My mother taught me how to get on the bus and ride downtown to a department store. We had a department store called Lazarus, and I could go down there and have lunch on my own, and I go across the street to the Ohio cosmetology school and get my hair done for $2.
Wow,
And that was
at
the
10 years
biggest
old?
thrill for me. Yeah, and then I got to go swimming. It was just so different from now. Like I said, I wouldn't let my 10-year-old today do that. My cousin and I used to get on the bus and we'd ride down towards our downtown area and we'd take swimming lessons at the Y there. And just the two of us. And we were, well, I'd say 9 and 10 years old at that time.
Yeah, it's amazing how we had. I know I had more freedom as a child than most children today. It's amazing, 10 years old, your mother taking you and teaching you how to get on the bus and ride the bus and be able to go all over town.
Right. It was, we knew exactly where we were going, and she went with us before, so we knew what to do. But Um, I did that about once a month. I got to do that, go get my hair done, something special. And then when I was about 11, we moved out of that area, so that was the end of that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was so much fun, and I thought I was so grown up.
Well, that I mean, and just the trust that your mom had in you to be able, to do that too. That's a major thing to feel grown up about. What
Yeah.
did your parents do for a living?
My mother was a federal employee. She worked for the federal government here in Columbus, and then my father, he worked for the post office. They both retired from those positions.
So they knew a lot about the town then, the
Yes,
whole
uh-huh.
city.
Yes, my dad was born in Columbus, and he knew a lot of the history of Columbus, and he'd tell me a lot of things about things they couldn't do as a kid, ever could do, and it had changed when I started coming along. Still things we couldn't do, like when I went to the store downtown. There was drugstore, I would call it a drugstore, Kresge's, and it was um, at that time racism wasn't as bad as it had been around here, but my dad had told me, be careful because you go in there and they will watch you the whole time because of your skin color. And they did. And I was just sort of amazed at that. I went in there and I think I did it just to see if it would happen. But he said when he was a kid, they weren't allowed in there and they couldn't go to the counter. to sit down, had a soda fountain counter. He couldn't go there. And then when I went, I watched, and I said they just follow you around, and so I just didn't go in there. But that was the only place I ever had a problem like that, you know. And it really didn't develop into anything because times were changing, and it was getting better, you know. So that was one thing I didn't like about going downtown. So I just knew where not to go.
But then it did affect where you felt you could or couldn't go. So that's different from another person's way of being able to experience the downtown when they were growing up.
Right. Daddy said that we'd go to the movie theater. We had 3 or 4 of them in the downtown area, and I went as a teenager. But he told me how when he was a child, they were only allowed to sit in the balcony. Negroes could only sit in the balcony. Well, by the time I grew up, came along, went to that same theater, which is still there. Everybody wanted to sit in the balcony. That was the place to be. So, and all the kids that went down to the movie, you know, everybody loved sitting in the balcony. I don't care what color you were. You know, I don't know if it seemed like they were away from the adults when they did that. You know, the kids and had their own little place up there. But that's how much it had changed when I got a little older.
Did your dad tell you about any other things that he noticed were different, like as his experience of being, an African American black male growing up versus now what he was seeing, for his younger generation, his children?
Oh, he he would tell us about what I had noticed, and he would tell us we had a lot of back then when I was about 6 years old, 7 years old, maybe. There were several African Americans that owned a business, and they were entrepreneurs, and it seemed kind of backwards, but as time went on, all of a sudden it seemed like they didn't own anything anymore. They had we lived along an area called Long Street, and they had names for that area. I can't think of what they were, but they were to tell you who lived where. Like if you lived in that area, you were the elite. If you lived in another area, and it's on the same street, you were poor. And if you lived in another area on this same street, then you were sort of middle income. So his father owned a lot of homes on that street, and because my grandfather, he was an entrepreneur. He had his own. I think he was the first one to have black male to have a auto mechanic shop on his own, and it was in the alley across from where he lived off of Long Street. And my other uncle, he did the same thing. My other grandfather did the same thing. But anyway, Daddy said that when coming up, they had a lot of businesses, but then it seemed like as time went on, those businesses, well, the owners seemed to just fall away as they died, and that type of thing. We didn't have as many. And now, today, that area really went down, and now it's building back up. In fact, because all the businesses in that area, most of them were owned by black, and we did most of our shopping right along this one street. It was called Mount Vernon Avenue, and they had a wonderful market there, like a lot of downtown areas have a marketplace, and you go and get fresh vegetables, fresh everything, just wonderful. And we had that, and everybody would bring their fresh meats and produce in there, and we'd go there to buy in the shoe stores on that street. It was a booming business district. And as time went on, it seemed like it just really went down. And not as many of the blacks really worked in that area anymore. And they started building more downtown, and they sort of cut that area off to the downtown. They built a freeway that went right through there, divided the predominantly Negro area from the downtown predominantly white area, and divided it in half, more or less. And people couldn't come back and forth through there freely, and it changed the whole east side. We called it the east side. It changed the whole east side. But Daddy would tell us how it had been, where they owned gas stations. There were 2 or 3 that I knew of that had gas stations, and they just, after they divided that area, sort of cut it off from the business area downtown, it just sort of went down. And now they're trying to rebuild that whole area, and it's happening. It's really beautiful now.
That's good. When it started the downturn, was it in the 50s, the 60s? Do you remember?
The it was in the late '60s, I think.
Okay.
Uh, because in the '50s is when it was booming.
Booming.
It was really booming. It was very busy. I have a couple of old pictures of that area, how it was just bustling with people and traffic, and in the '60s, late '60s, I think it started coming back, going downhill, and so it's like I said, it's growing again. They're changing the whole area, and it's so much better now.
Yeah, it sort of like coincides with after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, so you would think that it would have been maybe strengthening. But I know
Mm-hmm.
that there was still a lot of unrest that came across the country after 1964 in general because of all the various civil rights movements, equal rights, discrimination, you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
fights and awareness and everything. Um,
Yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever notice because and one of the things that when you look at that whole period of you know the differences of what was allowed for African Americans to be able to do or not do, they always say that the Jim Crow was less overt in the northern states, but that it was basically, skating rinks and public areas, housing. Um, did you ever hear or experience or know of people that had difficulties in other areas like housing, or other forms of, like your friends having other forms of discrimination against them that maybe weren't as
Yes.
overt as, say, you were down in like Louisiana or Alabama?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed something growing up that um, it seemed to me in the South, racism was in your face. They
Hmm.
didn't try to hide it. Because I had gone down to Memphis for a while, and then I knew some people that lived there, and that's what I found. In Ohio, in the north, I'd say it was more like they stabbed you in the back. They smiled in your face and stabbed you in the back. They didn't want you to see they were doing it, but they were doing it. So, and down there it was just open, so you knew what you were dealing with all the time. So uh, I was in Memphis, Tennessee for just a few weeks. I thought I was going to live there for a while, and I went down and got a job with the government, but I ended up not staying. And that's the way I felt about that down there. It was a little scary for me. In Ohio, we didn't have a lot of the tensions outwardly that
Hmm.
you found in the South. And when they had March on Washington, I wondered. I was 16, 17, somewhere around there, and I wondered why we weren't going. And mom and dad, why aren't we going? Why are my parents going to this and support it? But anyway, they didn't, and I always wondered why, and I thought we should be a part of it. But we didn't have to deal with things here in our faces like they did there. It was just sort of behind your back, and you felt a little bit of it, but it just, I thank God, I didn't have to go through some of the things that some of our forefathers, our ancestors had to go through. But anyway, I'm glad I was here, so. What I mentioned
There's
about
always
was when
time that if you want to
I did
talk
a
again,
class
we can
reunion
go through
about
other things, and
3 years
maybe we
ago. It
can
was
find
our
another time to talk.
45th year, I think it was, high school year. And our school was very predominantly white, and so the blacks were very, very few. And so we had a group that lived in the same neighborhood and all. But when I met back with these girls, um, as black kids in the school, high school, we had junior high and high school was all in one. And we always felt a little, I don't say pushed aside, but uh, we had when we had our prom, it was the worst prom in the world to me because the music was horrible. Because it wasn't the music that we were used to, at all. We were not considered at all, and things are just so different, and it just, And so when I talked to these girls when we had our meeting for our reunion, I don't know how I got into the group, but I did, and there's about 8 of us. We worked on this reunion together, and as grown women, they had no idea that the black girls were going through, and the boys, what they went through in their minds. And then I had no idea what some of them had gone through in their lives. And it was so interesting that we could come back together and throw all this stuff out there and say, well, did you know so and so? Well, did you know how they treated us? And no, we didn't know that. And one little girl had come as a child from it was Yugoslavia or something. Anyway, she couldn't talk any English, and she told us what a hard time she had trying to learn the language, and how people were really, she felt prejudiced against her because of the language barrier and all. And here I'm thinking she's Miss Cutie, she became a cheerleader. Everything was wonderful for her life, and it really wasn't all that time. And it was really enlightening. So that was just a little something I was going to throw in there. How things, you look at things one way and you don't know how other people are looking at you.